So good day, everyone. Can we hear each other? So welcome to the second session of the day, and actually the second session of the conference. And after a really good start this morning, we have an even, I have to say, more exciting topic coming up, although every topic is exciting at this conference. This topic is dedicated to youth in the decision-making process, something that we all strive for our voices to be heard. And so today with us we have four exquisite speakers from different levels, which I think, well, I'm sure they will bring really good insights into young people in the decision-making process. So I'm really expecting you to have even more fire and passion with your questions than from the first session. So on my left, we have Mr. Fatos Mustafa, the Deputy Secretary for Regional Youth Cooperation Office in Kosovo, RAICO. Then next to Fatos, Mr. Fatos is Kristen Aigro, board member of the European Youth Forum, originally from Estonia. Next to her, we have Darko Kaevski, director of the Agency of Youth and Sports from Macedonia. And the last and not the least, Vukašin Grozdanovic, youth worker currently working as the coordinator for Novi Sad European Youth Capital 2019 from Serbia. So without further ado, without me taking time from our speakers, Mr. Mustafa, the floor is yours.
If you don't mind, just put it here and yep. Dobar dan. Good day. Thank you very much for inviting us, and it's a really pleasure participating at Kruševo conference. The brand that you have made for such a let's say very young people devoted conference. It's my second time coming in Kruševo after I think I was 2009 my first time. So I have 9 years. After 9 years I came here. Yeah, as Gordana presented me that I'm the Deputy Secretary General of RAICO, Regional Youth Cooperation Office, which is a new regional body established last year in Paris summit. It is a product derived from the Berlin process, and it is dedicated to the young people, dedicated to the support of young people. Actually, the process of making this body happen started, let's say, like long time ago, and I had the chance to discuss with Metodi when I arrived today, and he was just telling me that 5 years ago there was one of our previous joint coordination team coming here and presenting the idea of RAICO. It's just 5 years ago, and then the Berlin process was aside with all this infrastructure and all the other projects that will go on within the region. It was also how we can strengthen and support the young people and prepare them as future leaders in taking in the hands of them the future our societies, leading our societies in Western Balkans. And what is the uniqueness of RAICO is that RAICO is a body composed of, within the structures of in our governing board is that there are two kind of substructures, if I can call it so. One, we are having 12 governing board members, 2 per each contracting party. One comes from government side, and the other comes from exactly the young people, representatives. And also one of the uniqueness of RAICO is the establishment itself. It is the unique process. Why? Because it was the first time where 6 of the Western Balkan 6 prime ministers sit all together and decided to have, to all together to trace the road for the young people working together, connecting together, sharing together, and also taking the fate of their societies in their hands in their future. Yeah. If I may say maybe a few words about me, So I'm here for almost 3 months. I've been working also in public administration for over 7 years in different positions, and latest one was leading public administration reform. I've been also working in international, such like as RICO is, but also dealing with public administration. I don't know if you heard about this regional school for public administration placed in Montenegro. And previously I was actively involved in youth sector, and even after when I was in public administration, I had in my special focus involving young people in a public administration decision-making process. Even not, let's say, like a voting process, let's say, being like really, but at least making them participate in the process and getting to know how the public administration process works, and also like somehow strengthen their skills in all policy-making process. This is about me. Thank you.
Very much. You may applaud. I'm sure you have a lot of questions for RICO, because we need to keep it in mind, since it already is a very important, let's say, player right now in the region. So please do write down your questions. Next, Kristen, the floor is yours.
Should I just what I prepared now? Okay, it's working? Oh, yeah. Thank you. So yes, I am Kristen. I come from the European Youth Forum. And with a few words, the Youth Forum is an umbrella organization for youth organizations in Europe. We represent national youth councils and international non-governmental organizations. And that's over 100 members and more than 40 million young people. I personally focus on youth participation, and this is why I thought under the topic I would bring up a couple of points now. What are some of the general trends? What are some of the things that are worrying us looking at youth participation in Europe? But to be honest, globally, we're facing the same issues everywhere. And maybe the dangerous narrative that I find is really important to address is speaking about young people as not interested, speaking about young people as not engaged, especially when it comes to politics. And this is simply very untrue. Yet we hear it all the time, we hear it everywhere. Young people don't care, young people don't want to participate. But the truth is that the real thing young people aren't interested in is politics as usual. So the traditional politics where you have politicians and parties that make you promises that they never follow up with, that you cannot trust, where you literally do not see an opportunity to change something. Going to the ballots isn't something that young people feel like will make a difference, therefore why would they go there? And there's the other side of politicians also do not even make direct promises to young people. So generally they target their electoral campaigns and promises towards older people. They talk about perhaps pensions. They rarely talk about things like let's give better scholarships to students, let's deal with housing problems that young people are facing, let's eliminate youth unemployment. They don't offer real solutions that young people would want to hear and see. So it's kind of a bad circle where politicians think young people don't care, so we don't target our campaigns to them, and it's impossible to come out of it. But we've seen very good examples of if you decide to target young people, if you actually talk to them, the situation is very different. The very obvious and recent example of this is the elections in the United Kingdom, where the Labour Party very clearly was talking about youth issues. They were talking about things that young people cared about, things that young people are concerned about. mounting debts over college tuition fees, for example. And it changed things dramatically. Youth turnout was huge. And the Prime Minister lost a lot of her expected success in the elections because somebody decided to tap into young people to ask them to come out because they made promises for young people that were really relevant for them. So to dismiss young people as uninterested is very, very dangerous, and it's just something that we see everywhere, but it should really end. What we really do is we talk about campaigning, you know, about youth turnout. Young people go out and vote, do something, but we never think about, well, maybe we should change something about what we have been doing, not asking young people to go out and vote, but rather change then campaigns. Now, I say we, I'm not a politician myself, and I'm not in a party, so don't get that confused. But I would call on parties to think more about, are they actually talking to young people, and maybe that is the issue, rather than blaming young people for not going and voting. Another actually trend is that we don't see young people themselves being elected or running for positions, which makes it seem as politics is not somewhere where young people belong. Globally, if you look at statistics, only 1.9% of legislators are under the age of 30, whilst more than a quarter of the world's population is between the ages of 15 and 29. So it's a real discord there. Young people are not represented, and our politics is not representative or inclusive, and therefore we are in the situation where youth opinion is not heard and is not represented in the way we make decisions. And in this instance, how are we building societies that the future generations will want to live in, will be happy with, that will address the needs that they have. So I do want to say that the positive promise is in civil society. I think this is the one place where we can see that for young persons, this is the place where you can do something yourself. This is the place where you can learn about how to participate in politics, how to change something in your own community, how to help others. And civil society is the place where you feel like you make change happen. And therefore, it is becoming increasingly popular, and for governments it should be important to support these opportunities, to support these methods of non-formal learning that come from, let's say, youth organizations, where you learn about, where you get informal methods of citizenship education, perhaps in participating in a model United Nations, or by going out yourself and trying to lobby for a change in laws, get something for your community. So our democracies need to look at how can we bring young people on, how can we rebuild trust with young people. Otherwise, there's a real threat to there's a real threat to democracy even continuing. There's a real threat to what our future will be like, because increasingly the trust is decreasing. But yeah, these are some of the concerns I wanted to highlight when it comes to youth taking part in decision-making processes. We see some worrying trends all over Europe and the world, and I'd love to see and hear your thoughts. So thank you.
you, Kristen. Next, we have Darko Krajewski, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation for this debate. It's always a pleasure to talk about the youth policies, about the youth problems, about the youth in decision-making process. During the past years, we have been fighting about the rights of young people in the Republic of Macedonia. The participation of youth in decision-making process is so crucial for Agency of Youth and Sport and the new government. We want to create policies for youth with young people and all stakeholders. I strongly believe that we have opened a new chapter in our country where we can include young people in each part of the society. As an Agency of Youth and Sport, we are making a big chance. We signed an agreement memorandum with the National Youth Council of Macedonia, with proposed to consult them and together to create policies for young people in our country. Also, I can tell you that we are working of reaching the capitals of local youth councils as a real representatives body of young people on a local level. This local council engage people from civil society and youth branches of political parties. That could be a real corrector of the local government in their municipality. These local councils should create a local strategy with intention to detect the problems of youth people and hear their needs in different parts municipality in our country. I also encourage young people to be a part of voting list for this local election. That's a great possibility for progress in their careers and to contribute in a positive way in the local community. I have great experience from the council in my municipality, Kisela Voda. I have been involved in all crucial process for youth, especially for better education, more jobs for young people. Today, I have chance to manage with the most important institution for youth in our country. With my team, we are working on strengthening the role of this agency. That means that we are offer solutions for youth problems and cooperate with the other institution and youth organization. The past 10 years were so difficult for our generation, for all young people in general. I do not like to make comparison with that period, but we should never forget that time, because in that period, we learned how to cope with the issues and to think on big picture, not only on our decisions. Also, there are so many comments that young people cannot make decisions as a consequence of their lack of experience. We are ready to change this artificial, not real picture for the capacity of young people. It's a fact that only well-educated and skilled youth will make changes, and that is the formula for success. I can confirm that with different examples. Last Thursday, I participated in a public debate for youth in the Assembly of Republic of Macedonia. We were talking about the Regional Youth Cooperation Office, RICO, for Western Balkan, together with the members of the parliaments and the representatives of youth organizations. We have proven that the fact that young people have an idea for crucial communication in the highest institution in our political system. So we deserve the chance that is offered to us. As a representative of the government, I can tell you that we are developing a real plan for cooperation with all stakeholders, including more young people in different sectors. My priority is to include students' organization in a decision-making process. We cannot make a new law for higher education without their notes and suggestions. Creating an inclusive society is not an easy process. We are not beginning of a new era where the solidarity and support from different sides will contribute the achieve for our goals. I want to send a message to young people that they should believe in themselves, but also to respect the opinions for experienced people and to understand their comments as a positive thing. Agency for Youth and Sport is changing the way of communication with the young people. You can see that consult them and collaborate in different activities, clear events, etc. My aim is to open an institution and together with young people to create the new law for youth and to be partners in many projects. Also, the participation of youth in sports should be developed in more ways. One of our priority is to enhance the youth categories in sport and to support young athletes. Yesterday, we give 500 scholarships for young talents in sports and we continue to work on it. I want to congratulate the organizer of this event, enabling us the time and resource to talk about this important topic. Fight for our youth rights and representation in all parts of society. Together we can make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Darko, very much. Now we heard on the national level how things can be done, and I applaud you for all the efforts that you're putting in. And the last and not the least, Vukašin Grozdanovic from Novi Sad.
Thank you, Gordana. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this conference and to be able to share some of my experience with you and in considering the topic of youth in decision-making processes. And also I was enjoying to hear the fellow panelists. I think they have a lot of experience and you can pick our brains in the next hour. I think it will be helpful for you. Just briefly to introduce myself in order you can maybe understand better the story I'm going to tell. 19 years ago, I was born in northern part of Serbia, and I was started an NGO. So I was 15 years old, and I started an NGO because I went to one training, and it opened my eyes, and I wanted to be involved in society and try to make changes. After that, I went to study in Novi Sad. It's a bigger city in Serbia, because in my hometown there was no university, and I became involved with student organization and student activism, because at that time we didn't have parliaments, student parliaments in schools, we didn't have student parliaments in universities, we didn't have youth representation in decision-making parts, we didn't have a law on youth, we didn't have a strategy on youth, we didn't have local youth action plans, we didn't have a local youth offices. There was no strategy on dealing with youth in Serbia 10 and 15 years ago. And in order to achieve the things that we have now, it's law on youth, strategy on youth, ministry on youth, local youth offices in 170 municipalities out of 174. We have local youth action plans. We have youth taking part in decision-making processes. We had to fight for that. We had to be involved, and we had to be loud and clear about things we wanted to do and how to achieve them. What did we do? In 2002 and 2003, we started talking with decision makers. We said, okay, we need a ministry, we need a strategy, we need somebody in this country taking care of youth, thinking about youth, involving youth in decision-making processes. And all we heard from them is something we heard from Kristen is, okay, that is good, but we do not want to make changes. Then we started organizing ourselves in organization in different parts of Serbia and talking to each other, networking, and seeing that we have same problems and that we need a national strategy, a local strategy, a regional strategy. Still, we didn't get anything from the politicians. They didn't understand us. They only said they hear us, and they only say they will help us, but you don't see changes. Then we organized conferences, then we organized debates, then we organized letters, and none of those things help. And then on one conference in 2005 that we called Does This Country Have Future? We gather all youth organizations from different parts of Serbia, from different organizations, youth organization, health organization, ecology organization, student organization, and we created a strategy how to come up putting pressure on decision makers and how to lead to the changes that we wanted to see. We talked with each political party in Serbia, and they didn't want to listen to us. They only invited us for meetings, and then when we had the meetings, they were only nodding with their heads, and nothing changed. And then we said, it's enough. We must do something radical. We must do something different. We want to be heard. We want you to listen to us. We have something to say. We have experience in the things we are talking. And then we decided to block the government for one day. And how did we do that? We invited over 200 organizations in Serbia with over 5,000 young people. They were active members then, and coordinately decided on one day to start phoning, emailing, and just every number that we have in the ministries, in the president's office and the prime minister's office. And you have 3,000 young people continuously phoning, and if somebody answers the phone, we have only one question. Do you know who is in charge for youth in your ministry? Do you know who is in charge for youth in the president's office or in the prime minister's office? And they couldn't work for a day. They couldn't receive an email, they couldn't talk to anybody, they couldn't do anything for one whole day. And as a result of us putting pressure on them and us saying, we want to be heard, we are here, we have some experience, they decided to talk with us, and in the next year, in 2007, we finally received a ministry for youth and sports, adding that youth, and this was the first national ministry in Serbia we had. So it paid off to have a strategy, it paid off to have networking, it paid off to put pressures, and not just talk the talk by sending invoices or sending memorandums, but doing the things that needed to be done to bring change. And after that, we were taking in account as a serious partner. Then we created Serbian Youth Councils. Youth were part of Serbian Youth Councils. Youth take initiative. Youth said, how are we going to organize our youth council? The ministry gave us support. Then we organized national youth worker associations. Youth and youth workers together were part in making those initiatives. Ministries help us. Then we created the national strategy for youth. Once again, youth was a key stakeholder in these processes. The youth was asked. There was a lot of youth participation in creating the goals of the strategy. Then we created Law on Youth. Once again, youth was strong part in decision-making process about law on youth. So all the mechanisms we have in place in Serbia today is because of young people like you here taking their destiny in their own hands, taking charge about things they wanted to see done, and uniting, networking, because together we are stronger, because together we can have one united voice that needed to be heard. After that, now we are working in bringing those mechanisms and policies that are now in place to youth like you and involving them even more. And now that's an even bigger challenge than the challenge when we didn't have any strategies and things like that, because now we have mechanisms, but we don't have young people taking part in those mechanisms because they are not so close to them. So by fighting with the politicians, we started to talk like politicians because it needed to be the way to have some success, and then we lost contact with youth. So it's really important to have a strategy both ways. How to talk with young people is one way, and how to talk with decision maker is a different way. And mastering how to talk with your base, like youth, and how to talk with people that make decisions will enable you to have more effect in advocating for your policies, for the things you want to change, and will help you be more efficient in the things you organize and gather to be part of your organizations and the change you want to see in your society. And it's not easy, and it's hard. And if it's hard, that means that you're on the right way, because nothing is going to be given to us. We have to earn it, we have to network, and it depends only on how much will we want to put in those processes, what will be the end result. And seeing so many of you here brings hope to me that new generations of young people are still ready to fight for their rights, to take what is their own, and to be more successful than even us before them. And I will be glad to answer any of your questions. And once again, I applaud you for making a decision to come here, making a decision to change something in your own society, because everything begins with the decision in your head, and after that, everything else is easy. Making a decision, that is hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Vukasin. Now that you've heard all of our four speakers representing different levels and different practices and different organizations, I open the floor to you. So please, if you have questions, in the back.
So, hello everyone, my name is Rachel Rajchev and I'm coming from Bulgaria from the National Youth Council. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your keynotes, and I would like to move on to my questions. So it's known that the young people are representing 1/2 of the population of our planet. And why do you think we as young people are not an electoral priority to the political parties? And do you believe that we will become an important part when all documents for development of the youth on global, European, national, and local level will be synchronized, because there is some overlapping or misleadings in the documents? And also I have a question especially to Kristen. how to make the process of the structured dialogue more efficient, because we know that the European Commission is spending a lot of money, and the results are, I don't know where are the exact results from the structured dialogue, even the youth guarantee. And what are the efforts of the European Forum of the recognition of the national youth councils by the national governments? Thanks.
Is it working? Yes? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so lots of questions in one. Talking about structured dialogue, just to say 2 words, if I'm sure not everyone in the room has heard about structured dialogue. It's the worst name for a youth policy initiative, I think. But basically it is an initiative by the European Commission to bring together young people and ministries working with youth topics and have them in dialogue, discuss, to consult even wider groups of young people, and then come up with policy recommendations. And I myself, coming from Estonia, which is, and well, you're from Bulgaria, so 2 countries that are now taking the lead in the structured dialogue process together with Austria, it's a big question on the table, how to improve this process, because even though we have this quite a good process where we consult a lot of young people, we talk to, well, we come together, we have established quite a good structure for it, yet we fail to have results. And I think a big part of the issue with the structured dialogue is that, first of all, it still needs time to develop. But we need to ensure better kind of quality aspects that we are now trying to introduce in this process, having actual researchers work with what we do in the process, and using these outputs to a more concrete process, which we might be seeing with this current cycle, which is discussing what the next European Union youth strategy should look like. So we have a very concrete output. We have solved a lot of the big questions out there. So I think we will see by the end of next year if this has worked, this trying to have a more concrete output, and in trying to more professionalize how the process works, because so many member states working together and other countries, not just the EU members, in the process. So I'm sorry, I went into maybe a bit too much of a structured dialogue details. If you haven't heard of it before, then it probably sounded horrible. Yes, so then to work in a more unified way on a global level with youth was the first half of what you were asking, I think. Yeah, oh, huge question. I think one good way to maybe get started is to recognize young people in working towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and having this framework be something where youth organizations are really empowered and seen and taken as the partners that they are in the process. I think that would be the best beginning, because many of the goals there are exactly what we're fighting for every single day in youth organizations. So to really use this process that is global, that takes in every single country, I think that would be the best opportunity perhaps to move towards a more unified approach. But of course, in Europe we see the European Youth Forum, which takes all of the continent and unites the work that we do as much as possible. We don't see that everywhere in the same way. So I think it would be great to see that spread globally. And the recognition of national youth councils, extremely important. I'm very glad to hear that here in Macedonia now, with the agency working together with the National Youth Council, this is crucial, because the National Youth Council can actually ensure a sustainable way for youth to participate and take part in what the questions that matter to them most, that affect them the most. It's a structure that allows for young people's voice to be heard, but in a representative way. So having an established structure like that is basis for good youth policy and good youth representation in any country. So this is something that the European Youth Forum is pushing for, is very much fighting for. And again, we see a great example now in Macedonia this advancing, so I hope to see it more in the region, definitely.
Good afternoon, everybody. Damir Naziri. One question, actually, you're all coming from different countries. The National Youth Councils, or whatever the umbrella organization is in your country, are they recognized by the state? Since in order to be able to cooperate, you first need to recognize the existence. As far as I know, I was not following it so much in the past period for Macedonia, but from what I understand, the National Youth Council has been recognized by European Youth Forum, but it's still not recognized by the Agency of Youth and Sports and the state itself. That has been going for a long time, but for now, I don't know if there is any change, so maybe give us your experiences about the umbrella organizations and how they're recognized, or if they're recognized by the state authorities. Thank you.
Do you listen? I think in our case, in our country, it's not it's not the same. We work a lot about the Youth Council in Macedonia. We sign agreement in the, I think, before 10 or 15 days, and we work a lot about everything, about the youth issues, about the youth problems, and I hope in the next period we will make a great strategy about the youth in Macedonia. So the Agency for Youth and Sport is open for youth organization, for National Youth Council, and I'm sure that we will have great cooperation and communication.
I was back when I was the first president of the Serbian Youth Council. So from since the establishment of the Serbian Youth Council, we had the support recognition of the Ministry of Youth and Sport. The Serbian Youth Council is even recognized by the Serbian youth law. So the only thing that still needs to be defined is somehow administrative funding for the Serbian Youth Council. There is an open call for Serbian Youth Council, National Youth Workers Association, and National Youth Office Association, only for those three organizations, but it's not really defined in the law. We are now pushing for that to be defined by the law, administrative funding for the Serbian Youth Councils. The thing we don't have in Serbia is regional youth councils, and that is maybe something considering the politics of the Serbian youth organization, because at one point we were pushing for the regional youth councils. Now that idea is not so widespread, but we have the support from the government, considering the point being recognized. Does that mean that we always agree? No. Does that mean that we don't have open channels and communications that we don't agree? But we are recognized and we are partners. The problem is, how do we communicate towards each other when we are not satisfied with the actions that somebody takes and with the laws and or events or things that happen? That needs to be defined by the, let's say, partnership you have with your ministry and the people who are representing you in the Youth Council. The other question is, when you say Serbian Youth Councils, you will see in the documents over 200,000 young people are member of organization. The biggest issue considering youth organization at this point in Serbia is, are they really representing 200,000 young people? And how do you get 200,000 young people to communicate through the system you have? Because it takes time. It takes a lot of effort. You need to have sustainable funding in order to be able to go and talk with a lot of young people about different topics that are now on the table. So for me, that is an also important topic when you talk about youth and youth council in Serbia. Thank you.
I think you also asked about our countries. In Estonia, there is a youth council, and it's recognized. Well, the existence of a youth council is in the law, so you need to have a youth council technically. It is recognized by the state, and what's very important is not to have a youth council just recognized by a government. It needs to transcend any single government. The youth council needs to be something that's in place with anyone who is in power. There needs to be the sustainability. And with the European Youth Forum, we often see sometimes countries saying that, well, you have a member organization, but this is not representing of our country. We as a government recognize another structure that usually is set up by the government itself and is doing what the government is asking of them to do. This is not an independent National Youth Council. It is not a democratic organization, and one of our most important criteria for a National Youth Council is that it's actually led by young people themselves. So with the Youth Forum, our membership, becoming a member and staying on as a member, there's a process in place which is not easy to go through. So the other youth councils from all over the continent ensure that this entire network answers this criteria of being democratic, being youth-led, and upholding values such as human rights. So this is the essential part of a National Youth Council, and of course there's criteria on how it has to exist, and it needs to be in a sustainable way.
Okay. I'm coming from Kosovo originally, so yes, in Kosovo it's recognized, but just let me explain how in RICO, since we are, let's say, like composed of 6 Western Balkans, we called 6 Western Balkans contracting parties. We are having different, let's say, cases, which is Albania, Bosnia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Serbia. So they are differently organized, but for us as RICO, it's recognizable whatever, let's say, like at the national level, it's considered as the representative of young people in RICO. So whatever structure they have inside, it's still a national, if I can say, business. All we need is like the name that the national authorities they bring to us, and we cope with, and they are part of our structure as well. Yep.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Okay, so my name is Dragana, and I come from Serbia. My question is about the problem. Okay, so the problem in Serbia especially is definitely a communication with decision makers and the government. But on the other side, we also have a problem with communicating with youth. So my question would be, in your opinion, what is the best way to communicate to the youth so they can be motivated and encouraged to act in decision-making processes, especially the youth that are coming from the side places, not from Belgrade, where they do not have that much opportunities to act and to be heard? Thank you.
And organizations for youth or different mechanisms, it's very important to talk with the youth about what structures are in place in their local community. This is why I believe that local is even more important than national and global, because the changes that will affect young people are going to happen on local level. So youth work, I think, having youth workers working with youth in the structured, non-formal way, explaining the importance of taking part in existing mechanisms, using those mechanisms to empower young people. This is how we can help them become part of society and help them be even more heard. this is why it's really important in Serbia, especially working with schools, because now elementary schools and high schools have student parliaments, and sometimes those student parliaments are not run by the students, they are run by professors, and in order to solve those problems, you need to go and talk with the professors, talk with the psychologists in the schools, and explain how to motivate people, how to let them take part in decision-making processes, how to empower them, because that is a skill, and sometimes professors in schools do not have time or do not even share the value that they need, that understand that young people should be heard. So when they lose motivation in their schools to become part of decision-making process, it's very hard to motivate them then in faculties or even when they have to go on polls and votes. And sometimes it's not real representation in the sense, because you have classrooms and then your teacher comes and said, one of you, usually the best student, goes to the student parliament. So they do not have even democratic processes in classrooms. This is very important to talk about representation and real representation. Who do you represent when you come from your local organization? Do you talk about what do you think, or you have a local group of young people when you ask them what is their opinion? When you represent your schools, are you representing your opinion, professors' opinions, or there is some way how you contact all the students and get the information on the topics you want to share? So for me, it's involving them since the beginning. It's very important to involve young people on the beginning of the processes, because when you involve them in the beginning of the processes, they have the ownership of the process, they understand the process, they are taking part from the beginning, and they can share it and then translate it to other young people when they come in different mechanisms. So for me, that is all about people who work with young people. So youth workers, high school teachers, and elementary school teachers are really key elements in spreading the value of being representing and enabling young people to take part in decision-making processes.
Okay, we have in the back again, and then, okay, you have the mic then.
Hello, my name is Helena Gandra. I come from Portugal, and I'm studying in Germany and working currently in Brussels. And I wanted to ask Kristen, in relation to the process of decision-making, for example, in the EU, there are several mechanisms, namely, for example, the online open consultations, which are open to everybody, but, for example, a lot of young people, they don't know about the existence of such mechanisms. So my question is, don't you think that sometimes it is a problem of awareness and communication, rather that the mechanisms do not exist? Thank you.
Oh, yes. Yes, now it is. Okay, great. This actually reminds me, Jean-Claude Juncker was doing this Facebook Live session with some YouTubers, and he was asked a similar question about the communication issues that are there. And he said that they are doing this wonderful citizens dialogue with everyone, and that's solving all of the problems, which is definitely not true. But but to come to your question precisely, the problem is that it's not communicated in an understandable way. Because if you look at it, how easy is it to understand what's going on there? How easy is it to understand what the European level is and what the European level can actually do for you as a person? It's really difficult to understand. It's really difficult to get to this level. So when we talk about young people and participation, it's important to come together and talk on an equal level. So if a politician sits in a suit and invites a bunch of people to come to their office and speak, it's not speaking on an equal level. You need to find informal spaces where everybody can feel comfortable, when everybody can express their opinions. So if you want to do these consultations, if you want to provide these spaces, then you need to rethink them. You need to think in terms of what is a space where you feel actually safe to share your opinions, where you don't need to know the language of the Eurobubble, for example. So this is a challenge, but often youth organizations are the places that can offer these kinds of spaces to speak about what matters to you in a more understandable way and make a difference in this regard. So that is my answer, although communication in the European Union and the communication and even with national government or a local government and young people is a huge challenge. So any good answers are very welcome, because we have our methods in youth organizations, but the more we do this, the better, because it's really important.
And I would like to go back to what Mr. Grozdanovic said about the involvement of young people in the high schools. And I would like to ask you from the perspective of, personally, I'm one of the founders of the Sofia Student Council, which unites more than 100 schools, high schools in Sofia. And what are the mechanisms for you to make this kind of organizations sustainable? Because you know that students couldn't be an NGO. They're most of the time they're a non-formal group that limits their opportunities for applying for some kind of projects or funding or what else. And also there is something really important when you're talking about student organization, and that is the moment when we have graduating students, and there is every new year we have a new team, and how you envision to make this kind of organization sustainable. Thank you.
It will be start working now. Yes. This is why it's important to have some kind of institutional memory in those organizations that are limited by 2 or 3 years, like high school and student organizations. Maybe to have a mixed, when you have people going not elected for 2 years, but for 2 years in a different board. So you have one half of the board from the existing year, and then they leave when they graduate, but you have half of them that are younger, introducing new members. So there are some kind of different models that can help towards that. But when you start about talking about funding, I think that is a big issue in Serbia as well. And I think we are thinking about it very wrong, because it doesn't have to be everything about the project. You do not have to get funds, have to get money in sense writing a project and getting it that way. You can fundraise differently. I remember 20 years ago when we tried to organize the training for peer educators in my organization that primarily does HIV and AIDS prevention. We didn't have money, but we get things that we needed for organizing things like trainings. So you go in 20 bakeries and ask them, okay, can we have one bagel in 20 bakeries? And they give us one bagel in 20 bakeries. So we do not have money for paying for food. We raise it in that way. If you need a space, school usually have spaces. If you need, you can organize some kind of humanitarian concert, things like that, where you can budget for high school student organizations. You have several examples in Novi Sad, where some parliaments of some schools that are better organized, that have better support from their teachers, they have budgets. In some schools where there is not good communication between teachers and schools, and they are not really supported from their teachers, they do not have those kinds of opportunities to have budget and to try to make some changes. So I think we can think outside of the box. You need to have a project and write it. You can fundraise differently in your local communities. Yeah, it's the question of sustainability comes for me in a way that it's really important for each new generation to fight for their rights, in the sense that is a learning process. For me, it's more important to translate the value of things you need to do, rather than having €1 million in your budget for next 5 years. Because when you have the resources, but you didn't obtain them, you didn't understand the process, you will differently manage those funds. And we had those kinds of examples with organizations when the structure changes and you have fundings. The new structure doesn't understand how to fundraise them. They think that's the only way you receive a project or you receive administrative support, and when the funding ends, the organization ends. So for me, it's more about values and trying to find a way, because you believe that is a good idea, rather than having a sustainable line for your future development. That doesn't mean that you do not need to talk about sustainability. For me, sustainability is having an office, having a building for youth, having a youth center. That is a sustainability tool that is missing in Serbia, and we are now currently advocating. Because prior to the 1990s, we had youth property in Serbia, not in Serbia, but in former Yugoslavia. Each region had their own youth council. Their youth council had the property. So, for example, here in Kruševo, maybe there was a youth council of Kruševo 25 years ago that had a hotel that belonged to youth. So it wasn't a question of trying to find funds to organize activities, because you had facilities around Yugoslavia owned by youth organization or youth councils prior to the 90s. The best example how the transition was made is in Slovenia. This is why you have so many youth centers in Slovenia, because the transition in the 90s was smoother. In Serbia, everything was sold. So, for example, Youth Council of Vojvodina had their own hotel on the seaside and had a hotel in mountains. So youth from Vojvodina prior to the 90s, when they wanted to organize something, they had a hotel. They didn't have to pay for rooms. They didn't have to pay for meals. So they had the resources. For me, it's more towards that kind of sustainability, having resources that are like a youth center, like a hotel or something that you can use to conduct activities, rather than having money in the budget. So trying to think a little bit differently can help us solve some of the problems and issues that we think that are unsolvable, looking from the point of view we need money. Maybe we should go a different way around it. Thank you. Hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you.
What? Oh, now it works. Yeah. Yeah. So, do you think the youth should be led in decision making in every area, or there should be some certain areas kept for the youth? Thank you. Because I apologize. Because we live in the internet area and everybody is exposed for everything. So that was my question. Thank you.
No? Yes? No? Great. So, participating in the governance of your own life is a human right. So being part of anything that involves your life, you have the right to be part of this process. This is a right that anyone has, and young people cannot be discriminated in this regard. There isn't anything really out there that young people don't have an interest in, whether it's access to healthcare, to have better roads, to have better public transportation. I don't see that there are things that are just youth, like talking only about, let's say, education or, I don't know, access to some sort of exchange programs, anything. There isn't a single youth question. Anything involves you. If you think about it, young person yourself, right? You want to have a home, you want to be able to afford a home, you want to live in a city where that's possible, you want to have a good job, but you also want to drive on a nice road. So it's your right to be part of these processes, and young people are no exception to any other citizen.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I return it to a question about awareness. We heard earlier it's really important to empower young people to take on this kind of attitude. For me, I was part in decision making almost in everything since I was 15 years old. So I wanted to be part of the decision making process in my school. If there was no mechanisms, we pressured for it and we were able to do it. When I went to study, there was no student parliament, so we pressured, worked for it, and then we were able to create a student parliament. When I had a daughter and I went to a parents' meeting, there I also wanted to take part in decision-making processes there. When I moved into an apartment building, I wanted to be part of the assembly of the building because it also concerns me. So the question is, what is your real concerns? What motivates you? What hurts you? And this is from where you have the answer to your question. But it's really important when you want to take part in some decision making, you have to be informed, you have to look for models and look for mechanisms. And this is why we talk about those mechanisms really not being applicable for young people because of the language, because of the way they are created. And this is why we think it's important the work that youth organizations do and of youth workers trying to empower young people and bring those existing mechanisms to them, for them to take part in, for their voices to be heard. And for me, it all comes from you. Everything you are interested about, you have the right to be part in decision-making processes. Go and learn what kind of existing mechanisms are in your country, and then take part of them, because there are.
Yes. Yes, it's right. But if you just allow me, like sometimes it's like, at least it should be considered also as an obligation. Of course, there is no, let's say, like obligation obliging you participating in decision-making process, but it depends what the decision is about. If it's about, like, for example, like coloring the city in one color, can be like a short term, and then it's still like you want to say, like, yeah, we want or we don't want. But if there is something that affects your life in long term, that you like the bringing back in ground zero the situation, it's impossible, then just feel as an obligation that, because that will be an obligation of you. For example, building highways, taking like let's say like international loans or whatever. They might sound like very, very macro decisions, but still, that's your generations that will be paying off all these ones that you take it. And you have to just be careful, you know, like whatever is being there. I'm coming from Kosovo. I told, like, we have a proverb saying, like, it was very first question, why decision makers, it's also with what Christine said, why decision makers somehow look young people and they don't involve in the process. And Christine mentioned some statistics that it's very low number of young people participating, or I'm sorry, MPs in this. So there are two kinds of participation. One is like being part of direct as a decision maker, and the other one is like participating in decision-making process. So by not being MPs, still you can contribute and be part of decision-making process, even as an outsider. Just going there and say, like, no, this works like this, but by bringing alternatives, not just saying no. But if you say no, then you bring your own alternatives with all the effects that you think it will imply the one that, let's say, like the government or in national, local level, and so on and so forth. So going back what I was saying, like in Kosovo, to the question of the guy from Bulgaria, the mother does not take care of unless the kid starts crying. So exactly what Vukašin said. In order the Serbian government to really listen to these people, they started really crying. Not like exactly crying, but really like trying to make them at least like listen, because they want it or not, they simply just bothered them by not listening to these young people. And then they were pushed to listen to these young people there. So just try to bother in positive sense your local, national governments, and even regional level, because now we are coming, and since I'm coming from RICO, and so many projects now are going in regional level. You see, like all these conferences now in Bled, it was Western Balkan Fund, and they were gathered in Durrës just a few days, I think 1 week or 2 weeks ago, and they will gather next year in London. This Berlin process. They are making decisions at regional level. It's not anymore national level. It's not anymore in local level. It's also in regional level. And it's a matter of young people coming from the region. What is impacting these regional projects, these regional, whatever is going to happen, what is impacting the regional level? What are the benefits, the young people benefiting? What are the obligations for the young people in the future deriving from these projects that will be ongoing in the near future and the midterm future?
Simple. So I want to say something about this. I agree with everybody. So if we want a great future, if we want more jobs, a more quality of our next 10 years, we must we must talk about our opinion, we must be a part of making decision if we want great future, if we want more jobs. So our next generation, except for us, they want to say something about all types of our neighborhood, of our construction in the finance and economy. We must be a part of everything if we want a great future.
Hello, thank you very much for this speeches. It was really nice. And my name is Dilek, I'm from Turkey. My question is maybe a little bit tricky, but I would like to ask this. 2 years ago, I had a meeting with European official in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I asked them randomly, like, how we can solve the Bosnian problem and etc. And they just answered me that maybe the next generation will solve this problem, maybe the other next generation will solve this problem. And I was really shocked when I heard this answer from the European officials. So I really would like to ask that, do we really expect something really great from the youth for solving today's problem? Thank you.
Yeah, I think you should have had one more following question, like, what does he, she, whatever was meaning by next generation? It could be like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's necessary, like clarifying in these cases. Yes, I strongly believe in young people. I strongly believe in young ideas. I strongly believe in young generations. Even now, like, I don't feel like really, really young as I was 9 years before here in Kruševo, but still, it's on all of us really taking the responsibility. So just be prepared. I see like a lot of faces which, at least to me, on my perception, seems like quite young. Be prepared of like being ready, facing challenges and making decisions. Today there are some challenges. Tomorrow there might come some older challenges, and you have to take decisions. Sometimes you might have to think about 1 hour, 1 week, for months, and sometimes even for years to come up with the decisions. If you see globally, there are some issues which are let's say like long discussions for years before the governments, especially those big ones, take some decisions. And tomorrow you are the leaders. You are the ones who should think about in concrete terms, and you should come up with some decisions. For example, now in Rajko, we are facing the difficulty between Kosovo and Bosnia that there is visa regime, which sometimes it's easier to go either in the United States or anywhere else than for both citizens going in the other places. And we are just thinking in Rajko how we can facilitate. It's still a bilateral issue and we don't want to interrupt in, because we are not supposed to interrupt in bilateral issues, but how we can come up with some solutions that can be accepted at least for the young people, to give an opportunity to the young people and let them decide for the future, as you mentioned. But for us, it's 5-year terms. I really hope it will be like very soon solved, but it's only one issue. If not, that if it's solved, that we will jump in what can be, for example, recognition of diplomas, how we can have like a liberalized market within the region without recognition of diplomas, and you go like all these bureaucracies, what RICA can do in these terms, what RICA can do in free movements, in free goods, in free services, all those values that EU has had right in the beginning.
I will try to answer quickly. But I feel like in a situation like you described, well then let's have the younger people take over. Because if they say it's the next generation, then the next generation can already be in government now. I mean, why not? And I'll bring a good example. I come from Estonia, which is a post-Soviet country. And when we became free from the Soviet Union, then our first prime minister was 32 years old. And he pushed through very strong reforms. Most of the state ministries were replaced with young people straight out of universities because they didn't want the Communist Party former people to still be governing our newly independent country. And today we're considered as one of the most successful post-Soviet countries, and we really came over a lot of those struggles that many countries in the former Soviet bloc have quickly and much faster. And we did radically change and have young people take charge. So this is just an example, and I'm not saying anything, but in Estonia it worked.
I will say about our example for our state. Before 2 years, we have problem with education, and students all over, especially in the capital city, came to the street and said about the problems in the education, and if we want better education in our state, in everywhere, so we must fight about this problem. If we put our problems on the side, and we will never find solution about our problems. So our problems is our present. So if you want to find solution, we must find now, not to put our problems on the side.
I will try to answer provocatively by another question. For me, if there is no solution to some problem or existing situation, that means that there is no will to solve that problem. Rather than there is even bigger interest in continuing the problem. So that's a big question mark. If you tell young people, the only thing you need to have to solve any problem is will to solve that problem, and if you put it on a national or international level, there is no will of solving that problem. That is the answer. At least my answer.
Okay. Yes.
It does work? Yeah. So you talked about the empowerment of the youth and especially of giving them a voice or a vote and of not discriminating the youth, but I was wondering if the discrimination starts with the minimum age of people to be involved in an election, which in many countries is the minimum age of 18, sometimes with 16, because I work as a volunteer in the Green Youth, which is the young party of the Green Party in Germany. And we have a lot of people who are 16 or 15, some are also 12, and they are really desperate because they can't vote and they are still bound to their parents or to the adults who represent their ideas or voices. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that there should be a minimum age? Because also I think this is a thing for educational processes, because many people in schools think it doesn't really, is a matter for them or an issue to think about because they don't have a right to vote.
Yes, it started. Okay. Lowering the voting age for the European Youth Forum is one of our biggest goals and something that we advocate for very actively. And what you said about there being no lower kind of limit age, we don't support that, but our stance is that it should be lowered to the age of 16. There is academic research talking about what are the cognitive capabilities of a young person, when are you able to make independent decisions, and 16-year-olds are completely capable of doing that. So this is the fight we're fighting right now. Austria is one of the countries that right now has voting at 16. Estonia also recently did this. There's Malta, other countries experimenting with it, but it's moving very slowly in Europe today, and there's a lot of resistance in lowering the voting age. So it's extremely important, and we feel like a barrier that doesn't make sense, where there are no real good reasons for it to be 18 and not 16, should be eliminated, because participation is a right. But it is a fight that we need to continue to fight, and to grant more rights to younger people as well.
Where's the microphone? Blažen, will you ask?
Sorry, I was just talking a little bit. Blažen Maleski, the president of the National Youth Council of Macedonia, and I wanted to start off a little bit to make a difference between two things. Recognition of a National Youth Council doesn't mean that the National Youth Council is involved in representing the youth on decision-making processes. So there are other mechanisms beside the recognition that there is a National Youth Council that involves young people and giving them a chance to raise their voice. One of the mechanisms is structural dialogue, and one really important mechanism for youth organizations in the region is RICO, because it was the first time that it gave really the voice, a voice for young people, and brought them to the table with a political elite that wasn't used to young people coming to the discussion table. So I think we have to make a difference between recognition, yes, you exist, but more importantly, we have to find the mechanisms on how to invite young people to the table. And I think we talked a little bit about that, but we were more focused on how national youth councils work, or are they recognized, and so on. So I think this is really important to have in our minds for the future. One of the things that were talked about in the beginning was young people and political parties. So political parties are not really popular in this area, I guess. And young people have been fighting for some time in political parties. And I know that the new director of the Agency for Youth and Sports in Macedonia is in the youth wing of the Social Democrats. So my question would be, why do you think young people do not want to have this fight in political parties and fight for their right to be able to create the decisions of their party? Because we see a lot of times, and as there was notes here, that it's really difficult for young people to participate in political parties. Why do you think this is so heavy for young people, and why didn't we fight in political parties? Thank you.
Okay, let's start. My answer is that young people don't have trust in political parties. Young people don't think that political parties are the place to make a change. They've lost trust because they don't have a reason to believe in political parties right now. And maybe this trust can be rebuilt, but right now it's very, very bad. So this is my short answer.
How you say, I came from the political party. I'm the vice president of the Youth Social Democrat Party in Macedonia. And I don't agree that the young people can't fight for the rights in political party. I think and I hope that we, like a youth organization, fight for a lot of things in Macedonia. So now we, for I don't know, maybe before 10 years, have first time member in the parliament. Now we have member in the parliament for the youth. Our president is the member of the parliament. I, like our vice president, is the director of agency and sport. And we fight on different way about our rights, about the rights for youth. So I think the youth in political party is not only for the, I don't know, for campaign or for the placards or something. I think that we make a great strategy about the youth unemployment, about brain drain in Macedonia. So in the future we will show how to implement this, how we'll implement these projects for the youth, and I'm sure that we will make a great results.
At least from the point of view of Serbia, that is an issue of the power of decision making in a political party. For example, if you want as a youth organization to advocate for some kind of change of a strategy and law, if you go and talk with somebody who is a president of a youth political party or 5 political youth parties, they are not at liberty to have any kind of discussion with you. They can listen to you and say, I have to go back to my party and talk to the president of the party or the structures. So if you are a youth organization or a youth council, then why don't you go straight to the one who is making decisions in the political party, rather to have a step talking with somebody who has no rights or liberties to talk about that. That doesn't mean that political party youth wings are not strong partners. They can be strong partners in that sense. The problem in Serbia, on the other hand, is because they are not legal entities. They are part of a political party, and it depends on the structure of the party how much power the youth wing has in the party itself. There are examples in Europe where the political party youth wings are legal entities, and they have different kinds of, let's say, power in their own parties, and they're appreciated and respected differently than in the region. That is something we still have to learn. That is something that still is a European value we are striving for, and that comes from the managing of a political party.
How about now? Oh. Yeah, sorry, I will be a bit, my attitude, I prefer to be pessimistic with hope than optimistic with doubt. So this will be the nature of my question. I've had recent experiences in Slovenia. We've hosted Juncker, the president of the commission, when he unveiled the white paper, and a few weeks after that we had an open structured dialogue with another commissioner from Slovenia between young people. Both experiences, I would say, from my perspective, were horrible in terms of the dialogue, because, for instance, when Juncker was in Slovenia, and he had, this was the core of it, the dialogue with Juncker, young people and Juncker, 70% of his answers to their questions were basically copy-paste of this sentence. The European Commission is not competent to answer these questions. So young people in power, I don't know, most, and I would say generally speaking, Slovenian youth are quite educated to a certain extent, but obviously don't give enough of a, pardon my politically incorrect language, enough of a damn to even learn to distinguish between European Commission, European Parliament, Council of Europe, Europe Council. So really, young people in power, I'm doubtful, I'm skeptical. I'm wondering, you've shared, of course, positive experiences, but also the other experience with the other commissioner that I had in Slovenia. I was part of that dialogue. The issues that were raised by young people were so simplistic that I found myself wondering, what the hell are we doing here? The lack of socioeconomic and political understanding of developments in Europe right now from the young people were horrifying. That's when you look at YouTube and you see a pretty little kitty, 15 million views, and you see some political panels and so on discussing important matters with 500 views. So until this changes, I would say drastically, I'm not sure I would feel safe with young people having so much more power. As you know, the wise, what's that statement? A wise person says something because they have something to say. A stupid person just says something because they want to say something. So until young people, I would say, become much more aware of the things that they're saying, what is it that they want, and what are the implications of that, I don't know if this dialogue, what do you see it being, how do you see it being really positive? Thank you, and sorry for my pessimism.
Now, it's working, right? Okay, good. Young people are not a homogeneous group of exactly the same. And I think that there are a huge amount of adults, older people that you would never want to see in power as well. I think that, I don't think that young people differ in this way. I think that there are just the amount of young people as older people who are more interested in politics and understand it better. But the fact that our citizenship education, when it comes to introducing the European Union, is not excellent. It's far from excellent. It needs a lot of work, is a very relevant point, and everyone should understand better. But my mother would never be able to explain to you what the European Commission does and what its competences are. So it's not an issue of young people, and to put that on youth is not correct. I think there are people of all ages, of more or less probably the same percentages, that have no idea what the European Union does or what the European Union could do for them. So yeah, I don't see this as something that's specific to young people.
Goes to the person that has been waiting for a long time. May I just ask a short question? I'm very interested in Raiko, since it's a new player, like I said. What can we expect from Raiko in the near future?
Thank you very much. In terms of, since we are discussing here with how the young people, we can really support young people, we are just, let's say, like an intensive work of making Raiko fully functional and operational in terms of rules and procedures, since we started, let's say, like staffed in August. And we expect by October to start with launching the first open call for projects, since we are a grant-making institution, and we just I would like to use this opportunity also, like of young people and the organizations, to start thinking of going through the website and see what Raiko does and what's the purpose of Raiko, and think of starting networking with other NGOs coming from other contracting parties within the Western Balkans, and start preparing their projects and make them ready for October. And still, if you don't manage to get any grant in October, you shouldn't be disappointed with, because of course there are certain limitations, and it's, again, our first call, and we are experimenting as well. And next year there will be like much more opportunities, and also we'll have much more experience with the process. And please follow us, and we'll be more than happy to support the young people in the region. And just to say, we are not Raiko. We all are Raiko. Raiko is not ours. We are just one secretariat who does the logistics, but Raiko is us all together. It's yours. It's us all together.
Thank you. And we have time for one more question, right? Two.
I gave up the mic a few times, but now I think it's the right time to ask my question, because it's going to be in contrast with East-Talks 1. Very often young people are told that we're not ready and we can't do that and that. But these things make us not take initiative, and especially in the Balkans, young people don't go that much in entrepreneurship, don't start NGOs. What is your policy to tackle this? Because if we look at Europe, there are many young people starting new companies, especially in IT, and this is not the case in Eastern Europe.
I'll be just brief when it comes to entrepreneurship. Just before coming here, I think yesterday, we had a meeting also, like it's a kind of approach. As I was telling, like Raiko is having a really strong support and commitment also from the European, let's say, governments. This is German government, French government, Austrian government, and others. So also we were thinking concretely of how we can support in terms of entrepreneurship within the young people in the region. So just follow us.
I will also try to be quick to allow more space. I think when it comes to problems of, there are two kinds of problems here. One is that there may not be enough services or support available for young people to actually know what are the possibilities, what are the things that they could be doing. But I think that it's sort of the system of, like, let's say if you look at the school, is something that every young person go through. It's a system where every day you are told what to do, exactly what to do, where to go. You have to listen to authority rather than be able to question it, be able to put your own ideas forward, to think for yourself. So I think that when we put young people constantly in this system of you have to look at this older person as your authority, then why do we expect that young people understand that they themselves have the power to make a difference as well, and they would be great at it. So things need to change.
Last question. Derail, but hopefully not too much. My name is Dona Kosturanova. I come from Macedonia. I appreciate the discussion, and I value each and every one of the panelists' work. And as much as I enjoy quoting research and policy briefs and policies and working towards them, I do think that this discussion has been hindered a little bit by an unrealistic optimism of the state and the Europe we live in. Because currently we're facing with rising populism, with basic need to protect fundamental rights all over Europe, and rising of also even right-wing extremism. And in this situation, when we're talking about the participation level, I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with the Hart ladder. We're basically hoping to talk about the participatory reforms, but in reality, many of the European countries are facing just, the non-participatory reforms, tokenism, decoration, and manipulation. And that is the reality of Europe, and particularly the Balkans. So in Macedonia's experience, young people for the last 5 years were particularly excessively exposed to extreme police brutality for their basic right to protest, or even to do a sit-in because of student elections, and would be thrown away with double police enforcement that there was young people there. High school students, minors, children would have their rights violated by those same schools they study in, with slander and manipulation. And media attacks. Many NGOs, youth ones included, were under threat of being closed completely, and many young people were basically exiled out of the country because they were practicing their rights a little bit too literally. And this is not a unique case for Macedonia. Serbian activists have challenges in walking down the streets because they're followed by guys that want to rough them up just because they did protests to protect their city. And the Turkish young people can basically not even practice their right to freely assemble. And Hungary can basically not freely associate in NGOs if they're deemed too foreign, or even their education is under threat when financed from abroad. And these are the realities of many European countries. So while we sit here and talk about the developed, sophisticated participatory forms of structured dialogue and representative bodies and co-management, the reality is this other one, and that is that basic participation and fundamental rights are under threat. So I would like to throw out here the thesis that if grassroots, genuine, disorganized and slightly organized civic activism cannot freely be practiced, then nothing else will. If we cannot allow young people to freely associate and do a sitting, then the National Youth Council won't be that effective. So my question to all of you is, what do we do, and what can formal structures, institutions, councils, representative bodies do to protect the rights of the disassociated young people in their countries and in Europe? And another one, particularly important in these times of peril, how do we reintroduce solidarity between young people? Because basically this is the concept that we need to hold on to if anything else is to work.
I was working firstly on the local level, then on the regional, then on the national, then on international level. And my answer to your question is, then I decided to work only on the local level and not even go on the regional level in the region of Vojvodina. because of the question you said, because most of the time people who represent grassroots level don't even see the grassroots level, didn't go to the local communities to see and understand, and the language of which they are trying to talk is completely different from the language on the grassroots level, and this is what I said in my opening remark. We need to learn or remember how to talk with youth. And my answer is I only want to work on a local level. On the local level of the part of the town, not even the whole city of Novi Sad. I think it's not important who is the mayor of Novi Sad. I need to have impact on the local community level to help young people change the things on the local miniature level that is important to them. And this is why I started and was involved with the Novi Sad European Youth Capital, because I believe more real difference can be done on the local level in the sense of understanding what the mechanism really does. Because a young people from Novi Sad can not really understand what does the mechanism of Serbian Youth Council when it applies to creating a youth strategy really does. But on a local level, when we talk about a local issue, about buses not going past 11 because young people like to stay a little bit later in the town, or some different kind of issues, be solved through a local youth forum that we created and opened and be raised, is something that can bring back the trust in mechanisms that they really do and they really exist. And then that's the question of going bottom up or up down, and that's the issue that we've been having in Serbia, is that we've been going from up and towards down, and not really from bottom up down. We only had 5 or 6 or 10 organizations that are really grassroots, and that's also question about the funding. So if you have an organization that is really thinking about how to be sustainable, then sometimes projects and activities go towards funding and not really to the issues and to problems on the local level. So the question is back to us, like I said, who do we really represent? Do we represent our own interests, interest of sustaining our organization, of an interest of the idea why the organization is created? And the situation we have in Serbia is that you have a lot of organizations, 27,000 civil society organizations in Serbia, 1,800 in Novi Sad, 1,800 in Novi Sad civil society organizations. But the question is, why are those organizations organized? Do they only want to be sustainable, or they have a mission? Are young people in them really doing the mission of helping high school students, or doing some ecological work or health work? And the question up to now is going local. Doing things that are visible, doing things that are not only said when you talk about mechanisms, doing things that are really easily measured and seen by young people. That will make them feel that they have power. That will make them feel having difference. This is why it's important, student parliament. When you go to high school and then you do something that really impacts your classroom, your friends, then you feel that you have the power, and then you get infected by that, and then you won't get empowered, and then you're able to change the world by changing yourself. And I think Kristen also said our education system is the biggest problem, because if we are wondering what is the result of the education system, it is all the problems that we are talking about. They came from 8 to 10 to 12 years going through the education system that is constantly telling you you're not good enough, you're not worth, you do not say the things you want to say, and then you rely on civil society organizations that are not systematically funded, that are fighting to exist to help them solve those kinds of issues. So for me, going back local, doing things that make differences, yes, it's great to have conferences. Yes, it's great to network on the international and or the global level, but I need to see more young people being active on the local level and making changes on the local level. Those are things that are needed more than mechanisms and structures. Not saying that they are not important, but I think at this point it's more important doing it locally. That's my, at least, solution. I don't know, maybe.
So I agree with everything with Donna. In the past, we have a lot of problem, especially for the youth in Macedonia. So in the past, the ex-government only make decision, only make a solution, and they expect for the young people only respect this solution. So if we want better future, if we want better education, better economy or everything, we must be a part of creating this solution. The young organization, all youth organization, the youth members of party, every young people in Macedonia must be a part of making solution. So if we work together about the next period, about the process for next generation, so in this way we can make a better process, better projects for youth in Macedonia. Thank you.
I very much agree with what you said. And if we don't have access to our basic rights, then clearly nothing can happen. But you need organizations to actually fight for those rights, because how else do you do that? If they are not granted to you, or if your government is not stable enough to provide that, then you need that National Youth Council to fight for those rights. And how to do that, there are certain mechanisms in place to then to take action against your country when your rights are not being met. We are doing this more and more with the Youth Forum now. We're exploring, basically our goal is to use the mechanisms are in place. If it doesn't work and if it doesn't go through, then we still win, because then we prove that we need better mechanisms and we need to do better for youth. So it's using those things that are in place. That is the tool we have right now for improving the situation when it comes to rights violations.
Yes, of course, what the colleague said, but still not necessarily being a structure in order to contribute in what you're doing. Just let me take an example of artists. Even one single person can say a lot and can really contribute a lot on what really should the governments do. One musician, one even a person. You wake up in the morning, you go in the city and just see what is really needed and go back and put something in paper. Being organized is, of course, the voice it's much higher, the volume is higher, and it will be more noisy, let's say, towards the policymakers, but still be active. That's the most important. Be active in whatever level you are.
Thank you so much. We have come to an end to this discussion. Sorry for being dramatic. It became a bit dramatic in the end, so I need to continue in that matter. We have heard a lot today. Thank you so much. We see that there are people giving us youth the voice. However, they showed us that we have the opportunity to have our voices heard directly. They gave us hope. However, you reminded us that we need to continue fighting, that we have a lot of work to do, so let's continue doing the work, yeah? Thank you. Thank you so much once again. Thank you for being so active. And let's go have some coffee.